If we can have everyone get seated, we're going to go ahead and start the session. And to start the session, we're going to have Cheryl Miles kick things off.
Thank you so much. You guys want to come and join us here? Well, it's been a really exciting morning for me and an exciting conference. And wasn't Jeffrey Moore fantastic? He's so great. I'm so motivated. Thank you all for joining the California Health and Human Services Agency session. I'm delighted to be doing the introductions today. California Health and Human Services Agency is in the middle of a data movement, which is very exciting. And we have 3 esteemed panelists here who are going to be speaking today. If you all don't know anything about Health and Human Services Agency, the Undersecretary will tell you about that. But I just have to tell you, if you've read the news in the last week or two, California has been upgraded from the 6th largest economy in the world to the 5th largest economy in the world. So that makes California Health and Human Services Agency has always been the largest health and human services agency in the nation and possibly the world. So we are very honored to have with us speaking today on our panel, Mike Wilkening, who is the Undersecretary of the California Health and Human Services Agency since 2008. And in this role, he is responsible for 12 departments, along with various boards, commissions, and offices. I also understand you have a second job that you're doing at the same time. Sure. As the Director of Child Support. Mr. Wilkening is the executive sponsor of the California Health and Human Services Open Data Initiatives and Agency Technology Council. Prior to joining the agency, he served in a number of leadership positions at the California Department of Finance as a program budget manager for the Health and Human Services Unit. He received his Bachelor of Arts and Master of Arts from UC Davis. And we have Marta Green with us as well. She is the Chief Deputy Director of the California Department of Managed Healthcare, where she's responsible for oversight of the day-to-day operations of the DMHC. Previously, she served as the department's Deputy Director for Communications and Planning, where she was responsible for developing, directing, and implementing the department's comprehensive Media and Public Affairs program. Prior to her appointment to DMHC, Ms. Green served as the Associate Secretary of Media Relations at California Health and Human Services Agency, which provides healthcare services, public health protection, rehab services, behavioral health treatment, and social services to the people of California. At the agency, she led a multi-departmental communications initiative designed to increase awareness and understanding of the Affordable Care Act and its impact on the state's healthcare system. She's previously led a variety of external affairs programs at state departments such as California Volunteers, the California Department of Rehabilitation, the California Department of Transportation, and she holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of California at Santa Barbara. And thirdly, we have Scott Chrisman. Since 2014, Scott has served as the Chief Information Officer and Deputy Director for the Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development, or OSHPD. It's a department of the California Health and Human Services Agency. For more than a year, he also served as the acting agency CIO for CHHS. Scott co-chairs the CHHS Data Governance Committee and leads the CHHS Open Data Initiative. So thank you so much for our 3 panelists. And with that, I'd like to introduce Undersecretary Wilkening.
Great. We're mic'd up, so that's all yours. Marta's got the clicker. Not many slides, and so Marta will take care of when they have more slides than I do. So thank you for being here today. Really happy to be presenting to you all. As Cheryl said, I'm Mike Wilkening. I'm Undersecretary of Health and Human Services for California. Those of you that don't know what California Health and Human Services is, it's an agency, cabinet level, that there are 12 departments. Yes, those of you that are counting, it's not that I don't know how to count. There are some offices that are in there that we don't count at department level. And those range from anything like the Department of Social Services, which provides CalWorks, CalFresh, so food benefit, cash benefits for people, healthcare services, which is the Medicaid agency, so healthcare, OSHPD, DMHC. There's a whole host of departments. And so what does an undersecretary do? So I provide operational and policy leadership for that agency. And the agency, in those 12 departments, we provide health and human service benefits to millions of Californians. Medicaid's about at 14 million Californians. About a third of the state's population is on Medicaid. And annual budget across those various programs of approximately $150 billion. So rather large agency. The undersecretary in an agency generally does not spend a lot of time on innovation, internal data use, or certainly not open data. Instead, they spend all of their time on whatever is blowing up at the moment, running from crisis to crisis, and quickly forgetting it once you've resolved it or put it back on a decent track and handed it off to somebody else. So about 4 years ago, I became the executive sponsor and eventually one of the biggest proponents of our open data movement. And glad to see that Esty is here because Esty was one of the people that was pushing me to get involved in open data. Those who know me know that pushing me is not a fun thing to do. I don't react very well to it. And so Esty was able to do that in a very nice way and to continue to push forward the idea that we really should be involved in open data and really get a portal up and start posting our data. She also was instrumental in explaining to me what open data really means. Other people had failed miserably at this. They had kind of just used the term and said, it was like, open data, of course you want to do it. And I'm thinking, well, I deal in data breaches, not so much. But then they doubled down and they started talking to me about hackers, and I was like, you need to leave my office. This is not a good idea. It honestly was probably one of the best things that I've done, both personally as well as for the agency in the 9.5 years that I've been undersecretary, was to start down this path because it's led to a bunch of different things. The open data portal in and of itself, I think we have over 250 data sets up there now. We get tens of thousands of hits on the portal, both internally and externally. So it's become a really effective tool both for our own staff as well as for people outside of health and human services. But more importantly, it's led to a lot of different things. It's opened our eyes to different approaches, different partnerships with research universities, with different companies, with foundations, with nonprofits that we wouldn't have been involved with before. We'd started to work on things with Code for America, which I would not have worked with Code for America in my normal line of business. Has become a very fruitful partnership. Code for America was one of the entities that came to us when we were doing the procurement for child welfare, and which was going to be about a $500 million procurement. It was supposed to take 6 to 8 years, and so they came to us along with Todd Park, who had been the chief technology officer under Obama, and said, this is going to be a disaster. You guys, you're using the waterfall approach, you're not going to get a good product, it's going to fail. And they were talking to the Secretary of GovOps and myself, and we said, well, okay, we're interested in what else is out there, but this is how procurement's done at the state level in California. I particularly really don't like the procurement process in the state. I find it, I was going to say disheartening, but that's really not quite bad enough. It's really, it's really kind of spirit breaking is more what it is. And so they said, well, you should try a different approach, try modular, agile. And so we're like, great, let's figure out how we can do that, because I said that there were three things that I know, and I go in front of vendors and I say this, they love it. I tell them there are three things that I knew about the procurement that we were about to do. I told you all it was about $500 million. At the end of it, I knew it was going to cost me more. I said it was going to be about a 6 to 8 year process. I knew that it'd take much longer, and I knew that the product that I got at the end, I wasn't going to be happy with. So other than that, it's great. You can see why I find it spirit breaking, and why I've spent a lot of time trying to stay away from procurement. So it's been really good to have those relationships, because I'd already started to hear about Code for America. I knew about the work that Todd Park had been doing, and so was much more receptive to that conversation, and they had more credibility coming in, so that there wasn't as big of a hump to get over for me to change and to say, okay, well, because we get sold things all the time. People come into our offices all the time promising the moon, and you're lucky if you get a vision of the moon at the end of it. So this was really good for that, getting that initial introduction and understanding where they were coming from, so that we were more open to the message that they were delivering. And so we did. We pivoted within about a month. We completely changed from a waterfall approach to an agile modular approach. Redid a 1,600-page RFP, took most of the information, and we a much smaller RFP for a modular approach. And I'm not going to say that it's success, but it's moving. We're seeing progress in it, and we're starting to see some deliverables out of it, and we're seeing the relationship is much better. But more importantly, what it also introduced to us is this idea of client-centered, that we really should be involving the end user in what we're doing. And so we shouldn't design based on what we think they want, but we should actually talk to them. And most of you in here are going, yeah, of course. That's quite novel for government. We generally do not, well, I was going to say we don't think about, I think sometimes we don't care either what it is that the end user really wants. Instead, we're producing what we know how to produce, and then you will consume it. So this is a pretty radical departure for government to start really thinking about what it is that the end user needs, and involving them in that process, and not just speculating about what that is or asserting what it will be. And that really has started to permeate throughout the agency as we started talking about our programs. And when I first started as undersecretary, we were in the middle of a recession, and we were making billions of dollars of cuts in health and human services. So I spent about a 2-hour period with the secretary at the time. I was appointed under Schwarzenegger and continued into the Brown administration. So I was sitting with the secretary, and it was about a 2-hour session, really painful. The cuts that we were looking at pretty drastic cuts in Medicaid, big cuts in CalWORKs, in-home supportive services, even into developmental services, mental health services, just kind of across the board. We were cutting to hit billions of dollars of reduction targets. And at the end of it, she looked at me and she said, so what's the cumulative effect? And as Cheryl said, I spent 13 years at the Department of Finance, so I was able to tally up the number pretty quickly. And she said, that's not what I asked you. She said, how many families are we hitting 2 times, 3 times, 4 times in these reductions? I looked at her and I said, I don't know. Our systems don't allow us to figure that out. I can tell you how many families we're hitting with the Medicaid reductions, and I can tell you how many families we're hitting with the CalWORKs reductions or the CalFresh reductions, but I can't tell you the overlap between those. I can give you averages. I can tell you that an average family that's CalWORKs is also receiving Medicaid, and if they have this condition, then they're probably getting in-home supportive services as well, but it's all based on averages and assumptions. Sadly, we still can't. We've been working with a USC researcher who's been doing some linkages for us, and we just last week were getting some of the preliminary information back, which is showing us what that overlap looks like across our major programs. Which is quite exciting, because you can actually start to think about things in client terms. And my departments are really good if I ask them any question about their program or the clients that they serve, as long as I'm asking them about their particular program. If I want to stump anybody, then I will ask them about overlaps between their program and a program that's not in their department. And you get a deer in the headlights look, and they say, I don't know, or they go back into what I did with the secretary and start talking to me about assumptions and averages. So we're now pivoting towards getting the data systems together where we can actually start to think about the client rather than about the program. And because that's really where it is. What I've started talking to managers in the department about is that I get, government silos itself. You do it out of necessity. The organizations are too big. You can't have $150 billion in program across 12 departments. One department by itself has over 200 programs. You can't do that in one mass organization. You have to silo so that you can figure out span of control and you can specialize. But the people we serve, their lives aren't siloed. These things interact in their lives, and to expect that they're the ones that have to figure out how to bridge our bureaucracy is rather insane. And as difficult as most of your lives are, and the things that you have to do on a regular basis, I'll tell you that the clients that we serve, their lives are far more difficult. And when we ask them to find documents, it's far more difficult for them to find a document than it is for you to find a document, especially if it's been misplaced. And we will ask them to do things like sit on hold for 2 hours while they try to figure out how to redeem a benefit at the same time that they're trying to work. So we've started looking at things. When you start thinking about things in terms of clients rather than the program, it may make sense to have somebody sit on hold for 2 hours. At a client level, it certainly does. That if you are not thinking about the experience from the client's perspective, then we're failing. We're failing them, and if we can't get that client level data and see the overlaps across, we can't truly understand the complexity and what it is that we're asking them to do on a daily basis. And it's impossible for us to really start to think about how to improve that experience, not just on a program by program basis, but really across the entire enterprise. We've also, as you can see the data playbook up there, as we started thinking about how to use our internal data, we've started putting together playbooks for our folks so that they can start to look through and do this in a systematic way rather than haphazard or just every single time it's new discovery. Where as we are figuring out how to do things, we're actually documenting them so that people that come after us have the benefit of what we've done. And all of this, as I said, is really moving towards that client level view so that we can improve how we deliver services for Californians. That I will turn it over to Marta.
Thanks, Mike. Tough act to follow because he's talking about a $150 billion budget. And I always joke that my small department of 450 people is somebody else's rounding error. So, we are a much, much smaller piece of the pie, but we do play a very important role in our healthcare delivery system. And what we do is we regulate health plans. So you can see our mission up there. It's to protect consumers' healthcare rights and ensure a stable healthcare delivery system. More than 26 million Californians, including probably most of you, receive healthcare services from a plan that my department regulates. So we have a little bit of a problem. Health plans are required to file with the DMHC most operational documents, and I have some health plan colleagues in the room that will nod their head, but everything from their provider networks to their template contracts to their disclosures to their marketing materials to their claims payment information to every sort of financial indicator under the sun. And we have 60 different applications that intake and process all of this information. And so it creates a problem that looks a little like this. Spaghetti. So we maintain millions and millions of documents and records. So there's a laundry list of challenges that this creates, but it may be more illustrative to give an example. If I want to know at any given time what plans are authorized to sell what types of product in a given county, and then figure out exactly how many people are enrolled in that health plan in that given county and that given product type, I can't do it. Because I'm looking at a bunch of Word documents, signed PDF documents. I'm relying on institutional memory from licensing counsel about when the health plan filed permission to offer this product or when they expanded their service area to this set of zip codes. And so a more efficient way for me to answer that question is to call the health plan. And as a regulator, that's a real problem. If I can't answer the most basic questions about what my department has approved for a health plan to do, how do I know at any given time that that health plan is in compliance? It is a fundamental problem as a regulator, so it impedes our ability to do business. And I won't go through all of the detailed reasons on this slide. So as we started thinking about how we were going to tackle this problem of having a real-time understanding of what health plans are doing at any given time, what they've been approved to do, and whether or not they're in compliance, we started looking at MarkLogic as a solution. And so we are a MarkLogic customer. We decided to start small because we have a big problem and we wanted to see how well we could implement it. And so we created what we call our OFR dashboard, our Office of Financial Review dashboard. It's one of the core functions of the DMHC. And what we do is we monitor the financial solvency, a whole lot of financial indicators about both health plans that are licensed and regulated by the department, but also all the medical groups to whom they pass risk. So when you've got a health plan and it's got your premium, and then they pay a capitated payment, a per member per month payment to a medical group to arrange for the care. And then they may have a separate contract with a hospital network, or they may pay claims on a fee-for-service basis. So that risk, that capitated payment, we're monitoring the health of those groups too, because if they go under, the whole system starts to fall apart. So we started with this somewhat small project, this single financial dashboard. We took a whole bunch of different reports that we currently receive in a whole bunch of different formats. And what used to take an analyst where you go to this report and you extract this number, and then you go to this report, and then you do some funny math, and then you compare it to this number, and you've introduced 10 different ways that you can get human error in this calculation. We've created a single dashboard to where at any given time, our auditors, our accountants, and our actuaries can go see the financial picture of any of the health plans or any of the risk-bearing organizations or medical groups at any given time. And it's completely automated. And one of the things that this project allowed us to do is to figure out that sometimes, and this will shock you all, they file incorrect information. And we have bad data in there. But without the process that we went through to put all the data together and compare it into a single screen, we wouldn't independently know that this single field or this single value was incorrect. But when we put it all together, we were able to see it. So this slide talks about the scale of the project. And this gives you a picture of the scale of the project. But as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot more that we want to accomplish with MarkLogic, or just overall with this initiative with our data. So in our future state, the most important thing I want to highlight is kind of what's in this bottom corner here, what we're calling unstructured health plan information accessibility. So that's kind of the promised land. That's being able to answer that question that I talked about at the beginning for any given health plan in California. For what products are they licensed, in what county or in what zip codes, and how many people are enrolled in those products in those counties and or zip codes. So if we're successful, there's all these detailed benefits, and I'm not going to go through them all. We'll be able to answer that question, but also be able to tell us without days and days of research by analysts and attorneys, without calling the health plan, we will be able to see in real time the regulatory performance of every health plan in California that we license and regulate. And so that will enable us to be a more nimble regulator, to more target our regulatory activity instead of using broad brushes that government and regulators often do. And so we'll be able to spot issues before they become real problems, before my department has to go take over a health plan and try to rescue it, which we've had to do in my tenure. Further, there's more benefits than just us being more effective. So I've got attorneys, right, with those licensing filings, and I ask that question about the counties and the products and the enrollment, and they have to spend a whole bunch of their time. They're the licensing council, they're assigned, they're in a database, and they're looking for those filings, and they're searching for them, and we've got Google search on these things, and they're pulling up these thousands and thousands and thousands of records, and they're trying to remember, okay, 2014, we did that compliance project, we made the health plans file X, Y, and Z, and they're guessing where this is. And they're spending an inordinate amount of their time, and I'm paying them attorney wages to do this. This is a wildly inefficient way of doing things, but it's also demoralizing. You don't go to law school and spend $100,000 in law school debt to search a database for files or search your memory about where they are. So being able to get access to those documents in real time and answer those questions can allow them to get back to the work that they want to be doing, because we're a very mission-driven organization. We want to be working on our foundational work of protecting consumers' healthcare rights and ensuring a stable healthcare delivery system. We don't want to be spending all of our time looking for records that are impossible to find. So wish us luck. We've done our first project. We're on to bigger and better things. And with that, I will turn it over to Scott.
Thank you. That's perfect. All right. Thank you, Marna. Good morning. Similarly, I'm going to talk about another department within the Health and Human Services Agency. So this is the Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development, often referred to as OSHPD. Some refer to it as OSHPD. So that's kind of wonkish that people would actually argue with the pronunciation of an acronym, but hey, we embrace it. So also a smaller department, but we focus a lot on work with healthcare data. We're kind of an interesting organization. We focus really on three areas. Construction and finance of hospitals and healthcare facilities in California. So we're actually the building department for hospitals, which is interesting. So we write the building code, and then we issue permits, and we monitor compliance of the construction, especially with regard to seismic safety, which obviously is a significant issue in California. We also provide some financing opportunities, specifically loan insurance, to help finance construction. And again, the idea there is around more access and certainly access to safe facilities as part of the mission of the organization. We also focus on healthcare workforce. We have a whole series of programs that include scholarship and loan repayment to health professionals in various fields, again, with the interest of service in underserved communities across California, bolstering access to care in that regard. And then we do a lot with data. So it's interesting in that we have actually statutory mandates to collect any number of data sets from hospitals and healthcare facilities in California and make those available. So transparency is sort of part of our mission. We've been doing some of these data sets we've been collecting for 40 years or more. We actually will be celebrating a 40th anniversary of the department this year. So we're collecting 19 million patient records every year from over 460 hospitals in California. We collect detailed financial information from hospitals and long-term care facilities. We collect utilization data from hospitals, long-term care facilities, clinics, and home health and hospice, so a wider swath of healthcare facilities. And then we collect a series of other, and I'll call them sort of unstructured or semi-structured, which is really kind of get at the heart of our use case that we wanted to share with you today in terms of how MarkLogic is helping us make this more accessible. But we collect a lot of little one-off things like charge masters, which is essentially a list of retail prices that a hospital would charge for procedures. We collect community benefit reports. I was talking to colleagues before the session about those. This is essentially, many of the hospitals are nonprofit tax status. In order to maintain that status, they, by law, report these community benefits. And we also collect fair pricing policies, so actual policies that hospitals are required to have to address sort of low-income or needy populations, and things like that. So you get the feel that while we have collected a lot of structured data over the years, we also get a lot of this more qualitative information that's often comes in document format and is less structured. And, we've captured that over the years and made it available in a very static form, basically just posted it to the web. So in addition to the collections, we also do a lot of our own analysis, and again, the analysis and production of reports really focuses on the structured data. And I think what I'm getting at is it's a missed opportunity that we've recognized over the years, that we have these other data sources that either we internally could use in producing a product that we publish to the industry for wider use, but also really just to make those things available so that they can be better mined. And that's kind of where we're going with a story in terms of where we failed. I'll kind of, in terms of problem and opportunity, I'll set up the business problem is we've invested over the years in all of the traditional architectures that we learned about this morning. And certainly we've been working in a data warehouse and a number of transactional systems for 2 decades. We hadn't invested a lot in our website, and that's a missed opportunity. And I think the fact of the matter is, as sort of a clearinghouse, and people look at us that way in healthcare, is that OSHPD has a really solid reputation for really good quality data, gold standard data. We admittedly haven't done a great job of delivering that. So if you think of the web as a delivery platform, that's an area where we've kind of turned our focus. And I kind of share the vision here of bringing those data together from where where they are is where you would expect them to be. And again, a lot of the presentation this morning resonated. We have a lot of silos, a lot of transactional systems. Many of those transactional are single subject systems that then we built sort of one-off query systems so that you could go to that system and query about a topic like utilization or financial, but you are not getting really a full perspective, or at least the available data assets that our organization is collecting about that healthcare facility, right? So there wasn't even really a concept of a 360-degree view, and that's the direction where we're going, and that's kind of the vision for this as we look to sort of overhaul the website and make it a delivery platform for information that people have come to expect from OSHPD in terms of healthcare data and analysis. That's really the goal, is to bring that information together and make it much, much more accessible and really focus on the user experience of folks coming to us. And again, admittedly, this typically isn't consumers, and we think a lot about what information should be going to consumers in sort of the age of consumer-driven healthcare, which I think is sort of a popular notion. I don't know that we're really there yet. We're really focused on delivery to users sort of in the middle. Consider us brokers or an exchange, in that we're bringing in information from over 460 hospitals and other healthcare facilities. Those are the actual users. I mean, the folks in the industry, the policymakers, the legislature, trade groups, associations, advocates across the organization, looking to improve healthcare, need to have data to inform those policies and decisions and initiatives that are being pursued. So that's kind of a goal. That's where we want to go, and really bring that information together and make it widely available through our web in meaningful ways, and getting away from kind of the siloed past. How we're planning to work on that, actually what we're doing today is implementing a new content management system, which is WordPress, and we're basically building out an integrated data content repository, which is MarkLogic. And we're starting with that. I don't want to say it's low-hanging fruit, but the assets that we have done nothing with previously, but we know from analytics of our website are widely popular, and Daniel can attest to that, right? Charge masters, while all we do is receive them from the hospital and then sort of post them in static HTML, and we continue to work on static HTML, is widely popular. It's very, very popular. And I think, although it's often criticized as being, well, those are only retail costs, it's not really what's being paid for healthcare, it's likely that hospitals are looking at their competition just to gauge the actual fluctuation of prices. Whether that's actually the price that's paid in the negotiated contract or not is irrelevant. It's a useful data asset. We should do more with it. And MarkLogic is really helping us with that. So we've actually already ingested some licensed facility information. So that's kind of the keys, if you will, the index and the IDs. We ingested all of the hospital charge masters, which is, 20-some thousand documents, again, have yet been unused. These are structured or semi-structured. They're not standard. So what each hospital gives you is what each hospital gives you. When the legislation was passed 10 years ago, it didn't specify anything, and so they just provide what they provide, which makes it all the more opportunistic for us to work with MarkLogic to be able to make sense of that information by ingesting it into a data hub, and then applying sort of indexing and organization and ontology and taxonomy and making sense of it so that now it's actually searchable. And I think that's the other immediate benefit that we're looking for as we look to launch the first phase of our website in August, so it's coming up quickly, is to really leverage MarkLogic as a search engine where the data is basically organized and coalesced and indexed. And then from a user experience standpoint, it's much more readily available to say, what do you have on Sutter Hospital in downtown Sacramento? So we're excited about that. The progress has been very fast. We actually were able to move on from the hospital charge masters and ingest a next document type, if you will, which is the community benefit plans for hospitals in California. So those are also now in the database, and then we'll look to bring in other data. I share here the importance of the open data platform that Undersecretary Wilkening mentioned. As sort of a data organization, OSHPD is actually the administrator of the Open Data Portal from a platform standpoint, so we're heavily invested in that. We intend to sort of also ingest those sources. So you begin, as we publish to there, we're able to make those all discoverable and searchable, through our website. And again, what this is leading towards, and I think kind of the next steps and where we're looking to go with this, is I think some of the things discussed this morning were meaningful in terms of smart mastering. I think for us, the healthcare facility is really the thing, and that all of the information that we collect and manage and analyze revolves around that. So our goal ultimately, and I think we'll work through phases into next year, but really looking to provide that 360-degree view of a California healthcare facility. And again, mostly hospitals. We have the most data around hospitals, but we think it's the best way to make it available and useful. In addition to that, obviously, we'll begin to mine some of this data that hadn't been. So I think, again, the charge master, I think, is a rich data source that has really been untapped, at least by our organization. I think it's likely being used in hospital settings for analysis and strategic planning activities. We really are interested in integrating and ingesting our GIS data. We've managed an Esri GIS shop for probably 20 years now, and are very excited about the work being done with Esri and MarkLogic. I understand there's a session this afternoon on that. I'm looking forward to that very much, because we really see those things coming together, because as part of the discovery process, as I shared in kind of the vision, ultimately we should be able to come in and sort of find a facility through a map interface, or search on a name, or search in a county. And I think the mapping interface and being able to discover hospital and healthcare facility information sort of at community level through a geographic interface is kind of critical to providing really a high value experience and serving as that clearinghouse for healthcare information in California. And so other than that, we'll continue to work on the integration with WordPress. We're excited about that collaboration. We're excited about using the extension of MarkLogic into WordPress and are actually contributing code to that. So we'll look forward to continuing that work as we go, and just looking forward to serving as one example of kind of the data and innovation movement that Undersecretary Wilkening was sharing out of Health and Human Services Agency. So thank you for your time.
Can you hear me? Yes. We have a few minutes for some questions and answers, but I wanted to really thank this panel for their leadership in innovation. As you said, it's difficult, and it's takes a lot of leadership to make that happen, and I think fits right in with this morning's talk that Jeffrey Moore gave about crossing the chasm, and then also being able to crawl, walk, run, and do it smartly. I think they've done that and are moving towards that, so I really want to thank them for their leadership. It's all in service of the citizens, and so we really appreciate that. Do I have any questions? Yes. We need a microphone? Okay, I can do that.
Thank you for the presentation. And you've talked about today, and I've heard all of you talk in some previous presentations about the necessary separation that must exist between you as state leaders and agencies and the vendor community via the procurement rules. And so I've also heard you, Michael, Undersecretary, talk about how you've been trying to find some innovative ways to work with vendors without negating those rules. So I'm just curious how you've been able to put together some of these great solutions with companies like MarkLogic and others and be able to do the kind of things that you're doing that you've talked about today and still stay true to those statutes and laws that you're bound to have to work around and work through.
Yeah. So when we made that pivot, I didn't get into the full story of it, which is we took a very small team of people, programmatic experts and procurement experts, and put them in a room and told them, figure out a way to do this. That we want to go to an agile approach, to a modular approach, and your job is to find the path. And every time that you run into a barrier, find a way around it. So basically, the only thing that we told them is if it's illegal, then we aren't going to be able to do it. But that was our barrier. And honestly, in the state, I mean, you can change the law as well. So I mean, that would just mean that we'd have to push it out. But what they were able to do was to figure out that under the current statutes and regulations, we could actually pivot to this approach, and that a lot of the barriers that were being thrown up were really practice or myth about what really was there. As far as with the vendor community, I've gone in front of the vendor communities many times now and talked about the traditional procurement, and I will tell them as well that it's spirit breaking, and I think on both sides that we've set up a process that's very contentious. That we don't have 1,600-page RFPs because our people like to write. We put those together because people are trying to wall off every element of risk that they possibly can, and you then create a very static environment that you then have to do change orders throughout. So, and the duration of these projects is such that by the time that you get to the end, if you don't have a dynamic process, you're not going to be happy with what you get at the end because your world has changed. The world of health and human services, the legislature will pass bills constantly to change how those programs operate, and your systems have to keep up. So you're either going to have a dynamic process for developing that system, or you're going to have a static process that you're then going to change order throughout. And you set up an environment where we're trying to hold vendors to the letter and exactly what we want, and the vendors are saying, well, but that's not what it says, and you get into these terrible discussions. And what I told folks is, when I was talking to the vendors about this pivot, is that one, I've tried to stay away from the procurement. We had 2 undersecretaries when I started. We went down to 1, so I got it all back. So I was forced back into it. It wasn't by choice that I picked up IT. But if I was going to be involved in it, I wasn't going to continue to struggle with it under the same approaches. And that if the vendors liked that environment that they currently had, then great, go find somebody else to play with. Because it's a terrible environment and it doesn't get a good product at the end. And so what I've told the vendors is that I want partners. I don't want the environment where I draft 1,600-page RFPs and then people try to figure out ways around it. That I'm really looking for people who share our goal, which is to provide better services for Californians. And if their idea is that they really want a process that does allow them to do change orders on a continual basis and maximize the amount of money that they can get out of the state, then go find a different agency to play with.
Thank you. I think we might have time for one more. I have a timekeeper. One more question. Oh.
Scott, you talked about the legislation not mandating a standard format for change masters. Is there an opportunity, maybe you can't get everything the same, but is there an opportunity for your organization to say, hey, we know this isn't mandated, but it sure would be great if you presented it in this way and at least get some voluntary compliance?
Yeah, sure. That's always an opportunity to kind of work through. We have a good relationship with the California Hospital Association and work with them about on data issues and things like that. And there's other there's nonprofit organizations that do voluntary data collections. We could work with them voluntarily. I don't know how incentivized they are and how motivated they are. I think community benefit's an interesting example. We see every cycle we see a piece of legislation come up, and typically they don't go anywhere. And the idea is to, raise the bar on what's included in a community benefit report. And again, the idea that there's actual investment in local communities that help justify the non-profit tax status benefits and things like that. So there hasn't been a lot of appetite, I guess, for driving those things, but I think we can work collaboratively. And I think as we start to roll out some of this value add delivery across the web, and again, I think the hospital industry is one of our biggest users. That we probably could show them, hey, if we did this, then we could provide that much more information. I think those opportunities are there, and it's nice, as sort of a data aggregator, we can engage in those conversations. It's a different conversation than a regulator. It's something that we've been doing this for a lot of years. So in California, the hospitals are used to OSHPD, working in this regard. So I think it's a great point, and it certainly is an opportunity to talk. The other thing I would mention on the charge masters themselves, which again is this suggested retail price. I understand that CMS actually has a proposed rule out that all hospitals post those publicly on their website. So, we've got a little jump start doing this for 10 years, and we're going to provide the value add so the hospital doesn't have to. So, hopefully there's some additional, benefit to California hospitals.
Okay, thank you. I don't have a timekeeper here, but I do think I have time for another question. Got another question over here?
Hi, thank you. It's been really interesting to hear you talk. Is there anything special beyond just the scale of California about California State and Health and Human Services that you would want to share with us?
Aside from the general size, a lot of the states also split into different agencies. So you'll have a health agency and a human services. So really the breadth of the programs that we have, which really is enabling us to think about that client level across health and human services. It's not that we'd pick up everything that somebody does with state government, but it does allow us a much broader view of it and provides us with a lot of opportunities as we start thinking about things like social determinants of health, that we have all of that or a lot of that inside of the single agency. And so it gives us an ability to really coordinate across the departments in a more seamless manner. And it's in government, each department has its own mission and it has its own things that it focuses on. And at the agency level, if you have those departments, you can help to bring those missions together. If they're in different areas, it's much more difficult sometimes to get people to focus that way.
And if I could add on a more granular level for health plan regulation, the act that we oversee is considered the most comprehensive healthcare regulation set of rules in the country. And prior to the Affordable Care Act, it was kind of the gold standard. Much of the Affordable Care Act is actually premised on a lot of the principles that are enshrined in the Knox-Keene Act. So it gave us a big head start with respect to implementation of the Affordable Health Care Act in California, whereas a lot of states had to build regulatory structures from the ground up, and we already had a lot of the foundation in place.
And then I would add just two themes. Again, not completely unique to California, but privacy, there's a very high bar. Constitutional right to privacy in California. So I think the discussions this morning about security are very, very important to any technical solution. We just, and when you're dealing with healthcare information, it's a significant responsibility. And then also just transparency itself. We talked a little bit about it. There's some significant laws on the books in California. I think we're probably the only state that collects detailed financials and posts them publicly. For hospitals. I think that's rather unusual. And then there's sort of a myriad of other transparency issues. Actually, we're implementing a new law right now around prescription drug cost increases, and there'll be some transparency and some public reporting coming out of OSHPD next year on that.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I know we are off to our next sessions, as are you all. I hope you all have a really great day, and I always think about if you can take away 3 things from any session that you can think about or do as you leave, and I think I've got like 3 nuggets from each of our speakers here, so it's been a very worthwhile session. Thank you so much, and thank you.